Hey guys, in this video I'm going to talk through a load of plugins, and they range from free to relatively expensive, more well-known plugins, and everything in between. And I'm hoping that I can show you a couple of plugins that you haven't seen before, haven't heard before, that will be very useful. And I'm only going to do the bass in this one and maybe like a few other plugins, but I'm going to focus primarily on the bass because everything else in this is going to take way too long. I can do other videos to talk through drums that I've mixed and guitars. I'll let you know how they all sound individually so you get an idea of them. But I'm going to focus mainly on these 4 tracks here, as well as this one and the main out, to give you an idea of how I've gone about getting a bass tone. So this here, apologies, is something that I put together really quickly as a test bed for mixing, such as some chords, a little bit of guitar over the top of them. Quick bass track that I had a little bit of life left in some strings, so I did that quickly. And then some drums, which I used Easy Drummer by Toontrack to make, and then put into some other software to just make it sound better and more professional. So nothing, not a full song, nothing special going on here, just something to use to test things out and make sure I'm getting everything to sound right and the way that I want it to. So this is how it sounds now. I'm still working on it, still a work in progress. I uploaded a video of the last mix that I did of it, but this is where it's at the moment, and I'm going to continue working on it. There's a few things to change, but this is how it sounds. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the sort of thing that I'm going for, more like a hard rock, metal sort of thing. And just a test, just to make sure I'm doing everything right. So I'll play sort of each individual parts of the drums, the guitars, and then the bass individually, so you get an idea of how they sound. And then I'm going to talk through the bass on its own and show you the stuff here. As you can see on the right-hand side, there's a list of plugin manufacturers, and I own most of these. There's stuff that I don't own is just trials and stuff that I haven't deleted. So Subfilter, I don't own any of those. I've found cheaper alternatives that I know. I didn't want to have to pay those prices for plugins like that when I'm learning. Maybe down the line when I know what I'm doing more and I've done more writing, maybe I'll invest in them. But until then, I don't see the point. But I spent quite a lot of money on plugins here, more well-known ones like Aurora DSP, for example. I don't own Soldano, but it sounds really good. I might buy it at some point, but all of the other ones here I own. I use them all the time. They sound amazing. Nembrini, really underrated, sounds amazing. But there's plenty of paid stuff. There's plenty of free stuff. Waves, really touchy company for a lot of people. I know a lot of people don't like them, but in terms of like good sounding plugins that are cheap, I think Waves is a good one to go for, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute because I've used them on some of the tracks. But first of all, I'm going to play the drums, then I'll do the guitars, and then the bass on their own, so you get an idea of how they sound. So this is the drums. So quickly for the drums, I said obviously I used Toontrack to write it, the Easy Drummer software, but then I put it into some more software to get a better sound, and I used Get Good Drums, Modern Massive. These are raw drums. When you first get them, you have to mix them yourself, which is what all of these tracks here in yellow are, and then all of those go into these green tracks, and then finally into this drum mix. So when you get them, they're raw tracks, so they don't sound that great. They wouldn't be anything you'd use without mixing them. But now they sound, in my opinion, fine. So you get the idea of how they sound. if you're looking for some drums and you're not good at mixing, or you don't want to have to go through the hassle of mixing everything, they also do a series called One Kit Wonder. I have the metal version here because this came out not very long ago and it was on offer. And these are mix ready drums. They're already mixed for you. So it means that you don't have to go through the hassle of doing it yourself, and you also don't have to use a load of plugins like this, which uses up CPU. As you can see here, you'll see just how bad the Neural DSP plugins are. Most of those are on the lowest settings as well. CPU hogs. But yeah, obviously the green one here and this drum mix are all just for the drums. So you don't have to use stuff like that when you have mix ready drums like One Kit Wonder. There's other versions of One Kit Wonder, but that's the one that I've got. But yeah, I used Modern and Massive for this because I'm trying to learn how to mix properly, and in my opinion, get good drums, probably the best sounding ones you can get. A lot of people like Superior Drummer 3, but I'm not paying that much for it, and I've never tried it. So yeah, that's what I'm using for drums and a lot of plugins. Just a quick rundown of a few plugins. I've got Reaper here, the Reaper EQ by Cocos. These plugins here, all of these are free, and as far as I know, they work in any DAW. So I'm using Studio One, I'm not using Reaper, and these are working perfectly fine. I've used this on loads of tracks and it runs perfectly fine. It uses up hardly any CPU at all. It's only an EQ, so it shouldn't use up tons. But I used the Fab filter. I tried the Pro Q3 out and it sounded good, but I didn't want to pay that much, like I said. And I wanted something with a lot of bands, because a lot of the EQs I was looking at and the ones that come with Studio One, for example, in the DAW, don't have a lot of bands on them. They have like 6 or 7 bands, and for some stuff you're going to need more than that if you're trying to take out certain frequencies to clean it up. So I found this one on a forum. Someone said about the fact that you can use loads of bands. I don't know if it's unlimited bands or not, but I've gone up to like 20 and it works fine. So I tried this one. I did a sort of blind test with using this on every track, and then using Fab Filter Pro Q3 on every track, and trying to get them as close as I could to each other, and then did a blind test between them, and I could hardly hear a difference. I think the only real difference that I could hear was me not quite matching the settings. Obviously they're going to have different EQ curves, but I couldn't hear enough of a difference to justify spending like £100 on an EQ. So great plugin if you're looking for an EQ, especially if you're starting out. Go and have a look at the Reaper, the Cocos bundle, because it's all free. You get an EQ, a comp, delay, gate. There's plenty of stuff in there, so there's no reason not to get that. Klanghelm, another brilliant company. They do so many good plugins here. These are free here, these 3, and then this one is paid. But there's paid versions of all of them, I think. I'm using the free one because it sounded great and I didn't need any of the extra features. And finally on this one, I've got Waves J37 Tape. I bought this the other day. I haven't really had a massive amount of time with it, but it sounds different to other tape plugins. They all seem to sound different. And I tried it on the kick and it sounded quite nice to me, so I kept it on there. A lot of people don't like Waves because of the way they market. They do sales all the time where they do, get a plugin for $29 that's normally $150, $200, $300. They're not, if you don't know anything about Waves plugins, never pay what the full price is. They're all like $29, $30, $40. But they always market it as having a sale, which it isn't. It's a bit of a dodgy way of marketing, but I get why people don't like them. But for me, they're relatively affordable and most of them sound really good. Some of my favorite ones from Waves are one of my favorite compressors, the API 2500, sounds amazing. C6 multi-band compressor, I bought that the other day and I love it. CLA 2A, they obviously do the CLA 76, which I'll be getting at some point. The H series of plugins, I definitely recommend getting those because the H reverb is really good. H delay is really good. I've tried the other ones. I don't own them yet, but I can get the bundle relatively cheap now. Well worth investing in. J37, obviously, a lot of people use this. The L2 Ultra Maximizer, like a limiter. great plugin, really good plugin if you're looking for a limiter. And finally, Sheps 73. This thing is amazing on bass especially. So great plugins by Waves. I know people don't like them, but I'm not going to let that get in the way of me buying stuff if I like the sound of it. Another website to check out, Plugin Alliance, if you've never heard of it. They always have a sale on every like 3 or 4 months, and you can get vouchers sent to you. And sometimes they do vouchers of like $20 where you have no minimum spend. So you can essentially get a plugin for $20 and not have to spend any of your own money. And sometimes they do loads of plugins for $20 and under, so you can get multiple plugins for that. So I got Gate here. I got a load of others the other day as well. Cheekily, I'll be honest. I think there was a slight glitch with the system. I'm sure some people know about that, where you could just get a ton of stuff. So I got this. It sounds great. It works for what I want. But yeah, Plugin Alliance has so many great plugins that I'll show you in a minute. I've got one on here, which is one of my favorite plugins I own. Reaper EQ again. As you can see, I used a lot more bands here, so justifying it already. And then finally, one of my new favorite plugin companies, Tokyo Dawn Labs. I never really looked at them before, but this is free, and they do free versions of most of their plugins, as well as paid versions where you get more features and stuff. So like the Nova EQ, for example. The standard version, the free one, is a dynamic EQ, and you get 4 bands on it. And if you pay for the other one, you get 6 bands of EQ as well as other features, obviously. So it justifies paying for it. But I use the free one here for the compressor, and it sounds fine. It sounds really good. I'm going to go and buy the limiter in a minute. I love it so much, and it's still on offer. But great plugins, really good company. Check them out as well if you're looking for free plugins. You can get so many good free plugins that sound just as good as paid plugins. And like, I know people are going to say, like, oh no, they don't, you can't hear the difference, you know, you don't know what you're on about. But let's be honest, if someone did a mix and knows what they're doing, so like, you know, get a professional mixer, someone like Nolly, Adam Get Good, someone like that, and you give him the option of using just free plugins or like plugins under 20 quid, like Waves plugins or something, compared to someone who's only been doing it for like a year or two, doesn't know everything about it, and is using all the stuff they want, I'd put money on it that Nolly or whoever you get to do it could get a better sound out of a mix using those plugins than paid ones. Always comes down to what you prefer the sound of and what works best for you. But also the biggest difference that's going to be made is your knowledge of it and how you use it. So if you don't know what you're doing with it, it's probably not going to sound that great. But if you learn it, you understand it, you're going to get a good sound out of pretty much anything. So that goes for other stuff as well, like guitars. You always see professional musicians try and play like cheap instruments and make them sound amazing. And then someone, you know, a mere mortal like myself or you watching this might go and pick it up and it will sound terrible. And it's all because of the person playing it and using that, you know, that instrument or that software, because they know what they're doing. They've got the experience in using it. So that's the biggest thing that I can give you here, is just learn what you're doing and, you know, get the free plugins because there's no reason not to get them. Also, Softube Tape, not my favorite tape plugin, but you know, it's another tape plugin. It's a different flavor of tape. This one I find adds a little bit more high end than others. So I've used it on different, like certain tracks here to get a little bit more out of that. Doesn't add a massive amount of color for me, but you know, everyone's different in the way they use it. That's what I've used it for. So that's sort of a quick rundown of some good plugins there. On the drum bus, I've got a Waves plugin as well as a few others. This is one that I got recently, Denise Audio Dragonfire Compressor. Sounds amazing. I don't understand that much about it yet. I'm still learning it, but I love the way that it sounds. Waves Shep 73, this thing's amazing on bass. I've used it on one of the bass tracks, which I'll show you in a minute. Relatively affordable, sounds great, adds some colour, some vintage colour to it. And Virtual Tape by Slate Digital. If you don't know anything about the Slate Digital bundle, you get all of these plugins here for a monthly price. You can do it month to month and cancel anytime, which is more expensive, or you can pay commit to doing a year of it and pay monthly and you'll get it cheaper, but you can't cancel anytime. I'm doing the yearly one at the moment. paying monthly, and you get all of those plugins. They all sound amazing. My favorite one is the virtual mix rack, which I've used here and a few other places, because you get so many different things in it that change the way that everything sounds. This is something that Nolly used in one of his videos, so I've essentially just copied the idea, and it sounds amazing. But definitely worth checking that out. You also get some like lessons on how to mix from professional mixers like Chris Lord Algae. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but you know who I'm on about. Everyone knows him. And you get to see the way that he mixes using those plugins. So you're not watching someone use a load of stuff that you don't own or you're never going to own. You're watching him use those plugins and get a professional sounding mix out of them. So you know that you can do it, and you can sort of follow along with the way that he does it. It's very useful. I'm not used to having a mic, so I'm going to punch it. So another one that I definitely recommend. But yeah, that's essentially just drums. So that's how they sound now. So they sound perfectly fine to me. Maybe I could add a bit more bottom end or something to it, but I'm still working on it. Guitar track here. This is what that sounds like on its own. So just standard rhythm guitars, chords, and then some sort of ambient guitar over the top. On all of these, I've used Archetype Nolly. On the ambient guitars, I use this amp, which is based more on a Marshall. On the rhythm guitars, I use this one, which is based more on like a EVH. Obviously, I've made my own version here and given it a weird name, but whatever. But I also used on the ambient guitars, I used the built-in delay and reverb just to get, something over the top that moves about a bit more. And then one of the other great plugins and bundles that I'd recommend is Melda Production. So most of these things you see here are free. Obviously, there's a few paid ones in there if you know anything about them. So the Drum Replacer, Convolution MB, they're paid, and there's a few other ones that I've demoed. But most of that stuff there is free, including this here, which is their EQ. So you only get 6 bands with it, so not like the Reaper EQ, but you get the saturation here, which adds some color. You get the harmonics part here, which I don't use, but really useful plugin. Some people don't like the way that they look, but it's not about the way they look, it's about the way that they sound and the way they work. That's another bundle that I'd say go and get if you haven't got it. Well worth getting, even if you don't use half the stuff in there. I think the only thing I actually use from this is that EQ, but it's well worth having just in case you need something there at some point. Those tracks go into the guitar bus, and on this, one of my favorite plugins, I've bought Purple Audio MC77 here. This thing just makes guitars sound so much better, and I don't know why. I can't explain it. It sort of adds like some color to it and stuff. Squeezing my own neck so my voice goes. Link the channels, turn the input up a little bit, mess with the attack and the release as you want, mess with the ratio as you want, but it makes everything sound better. Again, the Tokyo Dawn Labs compressor on it, and yeah, you've heard how it sounds. I think it sounds fine. Everything here is going into my bus channels where I have a Reaper EQ on the main one, and then SPL Iron, one of my favorite compressors. Not doing a lot here. Again, you can get this on Plugin Alliance relatively cheap on sale for like, something like 30 quid, 20 quid, something like that. I love this thing. Sounds amazing. Adds some color that I want to it. Then I have like a sort of parallel compression bus for everything. And on this, I've got the Purple Audio MC77 again. And on its own, this bus sounds like this. So I've only got the guitar and the bass buses going into this. I don't have the drums, but I'll play it again and I'll turn the Purple audio off so you can hear the difference in what it's doing. So it's doing quite a lot there, and what I use this bus for is just to add a little bit more to the main bus just to sort of bulk it out a little bit more, and it just opens everything up and adds more. It makes it a more fuller sound. So I'll play just the bus 2 on its own, and then I'll bring in the bus 2 parallel, and you'll see the difference that it makes. So if I'm being honest, I think that the bus 2 on its own sounds perfectly fine. I think that would be fine as it is. But it just adds a little bit more to the bass and the guitars having that there when it's sort of a bit more compressed and limited and has a bit more drive on it. It just bulks it out for me, and that's why I use it like that. These two go into the main bus just as something here, just in case I want to do anything before going into the main out, and then this one goes into the main out, for anyone wondering, which I'll get to in a second. So finally, bass, I'm going to play it on its own, and I'll run down the stuff that I've used. So probably not what you were expecting it to sound like, especially if you've seen any of my bass covers. You notice there's a lot of effect on that, and that would be chorus. So over here, I started out with one bass track on its own. I just recorded the guitars and the bass DI directly into my audio interface. I'm using an Audient ID4, in case anyone wondered. Sounds great, works really well. I'm using it to record this at the moment. But I started out with one bass track, then I expanded to 2, and then I went to 3, and now I have 4, but one of those is a send for effects. So one track wasn't quite enough for me because I couldn't quite get the frequencies the way that I wanted one track. So I used 2 tracks, exactly the same DI, but I high passed one and low passed the other. So I had everything below 350 hertz on one track, and then everything above 350 on another track. So the low track here, which is I've named as bass amp low, there's bass amp high here. So this one's below 350 hertz using the M equalizer and the purple audio again, and C6 from Waves, which is a multi-band compressor. Essentially, you can compress different parts of the sound in different ways instead of just using a normal compressor, which will compress the whole thing together. You can choose the points. So for bass, if you want to take out a lot of that low end when you go onto a lower string, especially, if you're playing something on the D or the G string, and then you go to the lower string, so an E or a B or whatever bass you're playing, whatever you've got it tuned to, you're going to hear a massive amount of difference in the low end and the bass punch to it. So this helps to just even that out, so that once you go down to the lower strings, it doesn't just go up in volume and sound horrible and make a really uneven sound. Well worth investing in if you don't have a dynamic compressor like this, or a multi-band compressor, sorry. So that's another one I recommend. On this one, I use the Dark Glass Ultra plugin. Not a massive fan. I used to have this pedal in real life, and I sold it after 3 months. I bought it new and sold it after 3 months because I didn't like it. I prefer this one, the Vintage Ultra, a lot. This has a more rounded sound to me and is more what I'm looking for. On here, I've got the high mids and the treble turned down. Not all the way, but a lot. And that's because this is the low channel. So on its own, it sounds like this. So you're not hearing a lot of anything apart from just bass and proper low end there. Which is why I have this channel here, which is all of the high stuff. So all the clank and the grit, which sounds like this. I won't play a lot of that because it sounds horrible on its own. But essentially, when you mix those two together, you retain the bass without having to sort of overly saturate it and lose the low end. it's a technique that you should use all the time for bass, because if you turn the distortion up, it's going to take out a lot of the bass in the low end, and it's not going to sound like a bass really. You're not going to get that punch in the bottom end that you're looking for. So for this one, I've used my favorite bass plugin, one that you might not have heard of before. This is by Aurora DSP. I'll try and make it a bit bigger. This is called Mammoth, as you can see. This is basically an alternative to Parallax by Neural DSP. And I think for me, this one sounds so much better, and I prefer this one in pretty much every single way. You can see the settings I've got here. If you've got this and you don't know anything about it, this red bit around here, I don't know why it's doing it backwards now, but you can use that, and that will essentially, I think it just adds some like high end to your sound and makes it sound clearer, nicer. It's more of like a secret sauce, I think they've called it. So if you got this and you didn't know about that, very useful. But yeah, this plugin sounds amazing. I would use this on its own on just a single bass track and get a decent sound out of it. But for this, I've used it just to get the clank and the dirt. M equalizer, Purple Audio C6, again, set the same as that, basically. And then finally, I've got this channel here, which is an Andy Wallace bass mixing tip video that I saw, where he took the DI and instead of using any bass amp simulation or anything like that, he used the Sheps 73, and all he did was turn the low all the way up. Nothing else was touched. This thing sounds amazing on bass. Like I said, don't know why, it just seems to work. I'll ignore the one in the middle at the moment because that's what I added. And then that Shep 73 on the video goes into the BX console. I'm using the Plugin Alliance Brainworks one. There's one from Waves, and a few other companies as well do one. So high pass and low pass, just a little bit here. And then you've got a bit of the top end, a bit of the mids. The low mids are taken out a tiny bit. And then this is something that I did myself just to bring out a little bit more of the bottom end, is turn up around 170, so it's on 176. I turned it up by about 3 decibels just to bring out a bit more punch. And then one that I found the other day that was on offer that I tried and I thought added something that I really wanted was Basement by Unfiltered Audio. So this adds basically like sub bass and makes it rumble more than it does without it. It sounded, for me, the bass was lacking a bit of that proper bottom end, a bit of that sub bass that I wanted. So I tried this, and then I think like a day later it went on sale. So, happy days, I got it then. So if I play this on its own, I'll use it without the unfiltered audio, and then I'll add it in so you can hear the difference that it makes. So I don't know if you'll be able to hear that too much through YouTube, but it's essentially just adding some proper bottom end to it, and it just makes everything sound bigger and heavier in the mix. So if I turn that back on, and then if I play the whole bass track on its own, I'll get to this in a minute. If I play this on its own and I just turn the unfiltered audio Basement on and off, you should hear a bit of a difference. Hopefully you can hear something there. It's just bulks it out, adds some stuff to the bottom that in the mix makes a massive difference. I've also got this channel here, which is the only reason I've got this is to add some movement to the bottom end. Obviously the bass and the kick drum are the bottom end of the mix, the base of the mix. So I want that to move a bit more. I don't want it to be just completely mono and static. So what I did was chorus is always quite nice on bass, in my opinion. So I used the Valhalla Supermassive. This is free, so definitely go and get this plugin. There's some presets in here, some reverbs, some stuff for sound effects and stuff like this. If you're going to get a free plugin, definitely recommend this one because this is quality stuff. I've also got the Valhalla Room here, and I'm going to get the Valhalla Vintage Verb at some point. They all sound amazing. I'll play this track on its own so you can see just how much I'm using. Obviously, I've got this set to only 60%, but you'll hear just how much chorus there is on this when I play it on its own. But you can see what it adds to the overall bass tone when you put everything together. So yeah, hell of a lot of chorus really, but you don't notice it too much in the mix, but it adds movement to the bottom end. So all 4 of these are going into my bass bus here. So I've got the CLA 2A compressor from Waves. Great compressor, adds a bit of sort of analog quality to it. Nothing really going on here. I just used the standard setting for bass. Sounded fine to me. Reaper EQ again, just to clean up the bottom end. Just high pass at 55 hertz, just to take out some of the grit. It doesn't take out the sub bass that much, which is good. Titanium 3 by Acoustic Audio. I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about this because I picked this up the other day and I chucked it on, messed with a few knobs to see what it sounded like, and it sounded good, so I left it on there. This is from Acoustic Audio, like I said, so this is under Aqua. All of these plugins here are free from them, so go and check them out. They're great plugins. I think they use up a decent amount of CPU though, especially the paid ones, but this sounds really nice on bass. And then finally, I've got BX Subfilter, which I think is free from Plugin Alliance. I think you get 5 or 6 plugins for free when you sign up to Plugin Alliance, and this is one of them, I believe. And this is just to add a little bit more to the bottom end again, just a bit of punch. And that's pretty much all that's going on for this channel. So, you know, that's how it sounds, obviously. So to give you an idea of like the difference that this makes, I don't know how much of a difference it's going to make, to be honest, but this is without, and then I'll put it on and you'll hear something. So that's how I'm using it, and it sounds fine in the mix to me. And then all of these, like I said, these 3 with everything on are going into this one and this one. And then into the main out overall. So here I've got Denise Dragonfire again. Then the virtual mix rack from Slate Audio. C6 just to sort of keep everything even and nice sounding. Then I've got the BX Digital V3. Again, you can get this relatively cheap from Plugin Alliance and Brainworks. This thing is really useful because you have the mono section and the stereo section, which you can affect individually. So if you only want to bring out some of the highs like I've done in the stereo section without affecting the mono, you can do that with this. I've also done the bass shift after watching a video about it. Very useful plugin. I think I got it for like £10 with a voucher or something. So it's stupidly cheap for something really good like that. One of my new plugins that I got, this is really useful, Voxengo T-Oat. So I was trying out the Golfos from Sound Theory. Always hear good things about it, and I thought I'd try it out because it was on offer for like just under £100, I think. A lot for a plugin. So I thought I'll have a look and see if there's any alternatives, because I do that with everything. If I'm going to buy a plugin, I look for alternatives and see if I can find anything cheaper that works just as well for my uses. I found this. This sounds great. Basically, it's like a rebalancing plugin, essentially. So the Golfos just makes everything sound clearer, is the way that I think most people would describe it. And this is essentially what this is doing. It's basically like a clone of it, but with more option, as you can see on screen. So this was like half the price on sale, and to me sounds just as good and has more use than the other one. But yeah, Golfos sounds amazing as well if you're going to look for that. Then I've got Standard Clip. I saw Dave Pensado use this in a video and tried it out myself, and it sounded great. So I went and bought it. I think it's like £15-20 for a clipping plugin, and this is the best one that I found for me. And for 20 quid for something that adds everything that this plugin adds. That sounds like I have no idea what it does. I'll be honest, I don't have a massive amount of idea, but I put it on there, put these settings on there, and it just adds to the sound. And then BX XL V2, this is the limiter that I'm using. I've obviously got the TDR, Tokyo Dawn Labs limiter here that I'm experimenting with, as well as the J37 tape and the Klanghelm SDR-R2, which I'm just trying out. Like I said, it's work in progress, so I'm still trying things out. But here I have essentially just nothing going on with these things here, but it's just to make it louder and keep it to a level that isn't going to clip and distort, and just try and get it closer to the level that you want for YouTube and Spotify and stuff, just to get a better idea of how it sounds. But yeah, this plugin, you can sort of use these individual bands here to sort of rebalance your sound again using the limiter itself, which is very useful. Again, you can get this relatively cheap on sale. Gain Match, easily one of the most useful plugins I've ever bought by Let It Mix, pretty cheap. You can put this at the start of a track. So if I was using, let's say, the bass amp high here that I've highlighted, I could put one at the start of this track and one at the end. And let's say that the signal going into this at the start before anything else is at, let's say, -5 decibels. No matter what I put in the middle here and what I do, once it comes out of the last one that I've put in of this plugin, it'll still be at -5 decibels. So whatever I do in here, no matter how much I do, it's not going to change the volume. So it's really useful for seeing how much of a difference plugins are making, because if you do something to a plugin in the mix and it increases the volume, you're going to automatically think it sounds better, because when you hear something louder, your brain tells you that it sounds better. So if you can keep everything the same level and mess with plugins in between and they stay the same level, you're going to get a better idea of how it sounds and if it's making a difference. So that's a very useful plugin. Ulean loudness meter just, is exactly what it says. It's just a way of seeing how loud everything is and seeing your LUFs and making sure everything's, not clipping and distorting and going to sound horrible. And then finally, Adapter Audio Metric AB, one of the most useful plugins. I won't go into this too much, but essentially it's a reference plugin with spectrum analyzer, correlation, stereo image, dynamics, loudness, meters and stuff that you can see here. But you can load up different files you've got. So I've got songs here, obviously. This one here is a previous version of this mix so that I can compare it and see how it sounds compared to how it did before. And you can flick between the two and compare them, and you can see on the spectrum here you can choose layered, dual or single, and you can essentially see how they sound compared to each other in real time, instead of having to, if you're here playing your track and then having to pause it, load up Spotify or YouTube or whatever else you're going to compare it to, press play on that, try and figure out if it sounds the same, stop it, go back into that, press play on this and try and match them. You can use that plugin to do it within the DAW with just clicking this button. So very useful plugin. It's on sale today. When I'm filming this video, it won't go up today, so sorry about that. But that's this mix. This video has been way too long, but hopefully there's been some useful stuff in this for people. If you want to see any of these plugins reviewed, let me know and I'll see what I can do. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. And give me some feedback. Let me know how you think it sounds. And I will see you again soon. Thanks for watching and goodbye.